This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
We've been talking about interest rates forever now, and as interest rates come down, so do rates on annuities. They're not as high as they were last year, but a lot of folks are wondering, should I buy an annuity in 2025? Is there something else better out there, Mark? So what are some instances where an annuity may be a good choice when it comes to guaranteed income?
Well, when it comes to guaranteed income, there always should be at the top of your list of considerations because, there's two kinds of annuities. One is to safely grow your money, and interest rates do come into play there, absolutely, but they're not the only consideration. There's other ways they grow your money through indexing and through variable products as well that are in the market. So you can be in the market or out. There's different ways to grow your money, but if we're looking for income contracts, meaning a contract with an insurance company that you can't outlive, that assures that income will come to you as long as you're breathing, well, that uniquely comes from insurance companies. And if that idea of having security that you don't really have to think about appeals to you, then it absolutely should be a top of your list for conversation. I met with a couple recently. They're in their mid-50s. They've done very well over the years. They've saved well. They're both good income earners, but they've saved well. And I was able to show them how literally with the stroke of a pen, they could move money out of one type of asset into another and know right now that for the rest of their life, between Social Security and what they would be doing with us, their income needs would be met. And then all the rest of the money then can be used for the extras in life, the luxuries and the just the extras with the grandkids, things like that. But in terms of their peace of mind, their groceries, their basic lifestyle, literally with the stroke of a pen, we can solve that problem. And it can be done same day kind of thing. And that was really interesting to see this woman's eyes in particular. I find the women are often a bit more telling with their emotions. They tend to react quite positively to this idea of security. Everyone should, but I don't mean to sound sexist, but it's some of the most wonderful expressions I've seen have been on ladies' faces where they've realized that literally with the stroke of a pen, we can eliminate that problem, that anxiety that you have about your future security. It literally can be eliminated with the stroke of a pen. So that feels a bit magical for me, being able to perform that for people, make that happen. But yeah, if people are looking for income security, come talk to us. That's what we specialize in. So if people are wondering if income annuities are right for them, I would say they're definitely worth looking at if you want certainty in retirement about your income, having an assurance it'll contractually continue as long as you live, and especially if you think longevity is in the cards for you. If you have good health or good family genes and you're likely to live a long time, you really, really, really need to look at these. And finally, don't feel like any decision you make today is permanent because, as interest rates change, as you were saying at the start, as they change, we can always refinance annuities, as it were. We can get from one type of contract into another. And we do that a lot for people. So that's our job, to stay on top of it. Your job is simply to decide how much money do you need and how certain do you want it to be.
I ran across an interesting article from Yahoo Life that addressed condiments that can make you sick if you use them past your expiration date. Mark, listen up here. Of course, mayonnaise contains raw eggs. No good there. Creamy salad dressing, it can easily spoil once it's open. And then pickles and brine. This was an interesting one there. They say watch out for cloudiness. So next time you go to make a sandwich or something, Mark, be on the lookout, will you?
Yeah, that's good advice. I did go look at my pickle jar, I guess. But certainly in retirement, it's a similar thing. Sometimes we get stuck to certain ideas that frankly are outdated, that need to be revisited. One of the big ones that's frankly been in the news recently is this 4% rule. We've had Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey chiming in, both at extreme opposites in their take on this, both of which I would say were wrong. But for decades now, since 1994, people have been embracing this idea that as long as they don't take more than 4% out of their portfolio, they'll never run out of money. Well, the fellow who came up with that in 1994 was William Bengen, and he was basically writing an article to a journal for financial professionals, and he was talking about people who have mutual fund-based accounts primarily. And since that time, a lot of the factors that he assumed have changed, such as how long we're living. When people are retiring 3 years earlier than what he ever expected. He had certain assumptions about their investment portfolios, and most of those assumptions have proven to be not true. And so the academics have come out and said, if you have a mutual fund-based portfolio, you probably shouldn't take more than 2.5% to 3% at most. So if you have $1 million in your retirement account, that's $30,000 a year out of a mutual fund-based portfolio. Now, we can show you how with income contracts, you can get to, some cases, 3 times that much out on a guaranteed basis. But again, the 4% rule is about people who have mutual fund accounts. And that old kind of gospel-like idea has really been discredited, and people need to think differently about that. We need to think differently about, how much should we be saving? People say you ought to save 10% of your income. Well, that I think is good advice in your 20s, but as you get into your 30s, 40s, 50s, you probably ought to be going from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25% of your income. As we approach retirement, we need to be saving more and really preparing for that. And we need to throw this idea out the window that there's a specific number that each of us should have. 2 million, 4 million, whatever crazy numbers people are advertising out there, because how much each of us needs really depends upon how we intend to live in retirement. So we got to really get rid of some of these one-size-fits-all rules that a lot of these media gurus are pushing out there. Dave Ramsey would tell you can take 10% out of your portfolio every year and be fine.
Woo.
Well, that's total malpractice for a professional to say that. And so we just have to really think twice about some of these, again, one-size-fits-all rules. It used to be said that your investment portfolio should be take the number 100, subtract your age from it, and the difference is what you should have in a stock portion of your portfolio. But that's not necessarily correct when people have pensions, for example. So again, one size fits all does not really it doesn't work. Yeah, we've got to think differently. They say you have to be completely out of debt. Well, not necessarily. Some types of debt may not be bad. And if we understand some of the strategies available with home equity, it doesn't make sense to pay off some kinds of debt if we really want to improve our outcomes in retirement. So again, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I'd love to talk to people about this. Maybe it's time for folks to reapprise, are the rules, the assumptions they've had in mind still accurate? Should we be thinking differently? And I would say, yes, most Americans should.
Now, Mark, we have talked plenty on the show about the idea of converting money from your 401k to a Roth, but it brings up lots of questions. For instance, if you convert money while you're still working, you could get thrown into a higher tax bracket. Nobody wants that. But if you wait until your income is lower in retirement, the conversion could result in high Medicare premiums and more taxes on Social Security. So it kind of seems like you can't win either way you go. How do you find the right timing and the balance here?
Well, you do need to thread the needle. And that's where a professional like myself comes in to play, because most people who expect tax rates to increase dramatically in the future get really anxious to get their money out of these tax-deferred positions into the tax-free Roth IRA. That's ROTH, Roth IRA, or Roth 401k. There's lots of ways to do that. But yeah, we want to manage the tax bracket so we don't suddenly get hammered. And there's some big jumps between, for example, a 24 to a 32% bracket. So we want to manage that. And we also want to manage what's called income-related monthly adjustment amounts, which is what causes our Medicare premiums to increase. So there's different considerations, different formulas that we have to balance there. And most people are unaware of these things, and they don't have to become specialists in it because I'm a chartered retirement planning specialist. There's people like myself who do focus on these things. And my office absolutely focuses on this because people want to avoid increased taxes in the future. They don't want to be subject to required minimum distributions. Well, when we convert our money from tax deferred to tax-free Roth, we pay the tax off at today's historically low rates, and we avoid having to take required minimum distributions in the future, which is wonderful for us if we don't need the money. Statistically, most people are not taking the more than the minimum out on those distributions. And from an estate planning standpoint, it really liberates us to think differently. The other consideration is that our Social Security can be taxed. And so to the degree we're working with tax-free forms of income, and I'm speaking about legal forms of tax-free income, we can avoid the increased taxes in the future. We can avoid the Social Security tax. We can avoid the Medicare surcharge tax. We can avoid the required minimum distributions. All of those are things that hamstring retirees, and most folks are not even aware of it. So come deal with a specialist. Come deal with us. We'll help you with this. And it is a matter of threading the needles, but we can create a strategic plan where over a period of years, you don't have to do the conversions all at once. You can do it piecemeal over a period of years and then just take kind of the pain out of it. We can make it more digestible. There's always going to be an element of pain when we pay taxes. If we're choosing to pay taxes when it's most advantageous to us, then it puts us in control. And that's a wonderful thing for pre-retirees to feel like they're in control. And I would say most Americans have far more control over this issue than they may believe. So we're doing these Roth conversions for most of our clients. I mean, people who come to our classes, this is the key theme, is how do we liberate ourselves from the crisis that's coming as tax rates are going to have to increase. And I could think of people, for example, there was one woman who came to us and she was in her late 70s. She's a bodybuilder. She expects to live a long time, but she frequently jokes about her mind going out before her body does. And one of the things she absolutely wants to do is leave her children tax-free money. And so she doesn't really need her retirement savings. She has a good pension. And therefore, we've chosen to convert all of her retirement savings over a period of 5 or 6 years in her case, so that we can, again, manage the tax brackets and not cause her to have to pay more on her Medicare premiums. But she really wants to be able to help her children because, like many people of her generation, they recognize that their children are facing much more difficult future financial circumstances than what the baby boomers themselves have faced. And so she's actually taken control. And we do this regularly for people. Now, sometimes people get into that 5 or 6 year plan, a few years into it, and they freak out because they're not used to writing big checks to the IRS. You just got to remember that the way out of an IRA is through the IRS. And so there is an element of pain, but to the degree we can plan that, then it's much more manageable. It's much more digestible. And again, we set up those strategic roadmaps for people. We show them how to do it in an ideal fashion. And then each year, people make the decision. Do we want to follow the roadmap? Do we want to modify it this year? Do we want to skip this year? The client is always in control, but we help them with the math. We help them with the hard part to balance those conflicting rules. So come visit with us, we say. Again, it's complimentary. So if you want to maximize your tax opportunities, your tax saving opportunities, come to us for one of these tax advantage roadmaps. That's really what is at the heart of our service is how do we free ourselves from these conflicting government expectations so that we can live the life we want to live and have maximum income for ourselves and maximum opportunities for our survivors, the people we love the most.
You know, younger generations that are counting on an inheritance from their parents, they might be in for a little bit of a shock here. A recent study by Northwestern Mutual found that the older generations are less inclined to leave something for their kids. And what's more is that they still haven't talked to their family about this decision, which we all know is a no-no. So how do you help facilitate this conversation, Mark?
Wow, that's a great question. We do facilitate it, but it's an incremental process. It's really over the course of all of our conversations, over the course of the relationship. Some people come to this realization very quickly. Others need help over time. And especially when people have more money than they're personally going to need, we have to ask the question of what do you want to have happen to this money when you're gone? Because if we don't plan for it, then third parties are going to get it, like Uncle Sam. And if you think Uncle Sam can spend your money better than you can, then, stay the course, do what you're doing.
Yeah.
But if you think that maybe you can manage your money better than Uncle Sam can, that maybe you can find more productive uses of your money with the charities or loved ones of your choice, then we would say, meet with us. Let's have these conversations. We can help facilitate family meetings. I've personally kind of been a moderator, as it were, that's led family discussions for clients. I think particularly of a divorcee, this woman who, as a nurse, has done a tremendous job preparing for retirement. And I had her children come in, her adult daughters all come in at their mother's invitation. I mean, I've done this sometimes with people over Zoom and all, but I was able to actually share with these children what their mother had done and why she was doing the things that she was. She wasn't comfortable really bringing it up, but she wanted the kids to hear that. And so she actually had me do it. Now, of course, I prefer that they do it, but I did it in this case. And it was wonderful for me because it started a conversation between them and their mother. And these women, these adult girls who, frankly, I had known as little girls in the neighborhood growing up when I was a teenager, but I knew these girls. And now, as adult women with their own children, they cried in that room as they saw what a tremendous job their mother had done and the provisions she set in place for her children, her daughters, who she loves so much. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, how it brings families together. So in terms of efficiency, keeping your own money, we've got to have these conversations. We've got to have these family meetings. You don't always have to tell the kids exactly what the numbers are. But I, for example, have told my kids, I've got some kids with disabilities who need some help. And there's, as we all know, there's mild forms of disability and there's severe forms of disability. Some of our kids need more help than others. And sometimes that help needs to come out during their lifetime. Some of it may be after our passing as the parent. But for example, when I'm leaving money, I'm doing things for my children now while they're alive because I know that they need it in certain areas. But money that I'm leaving behind to a large degree is going to be restricted. It's not going to be a lump sum that they or a spouse can go and blow all of a sudden, that they can be tempted to do something irresponsible with. But it's going to be structured to come out to them over time. This is one of the reasons I'm such a big advocate of having an attorney part of the team. There needs to be an attorney and an accountant working with me to help these families really get the optimal experience that they want. You've spent your whole life trading your time, your sweat, your energy to accumulate assets. What do you want to have happen to that money? If you work that hard for it, you ought to be able to do a little bit of work to preserve it. And when it comes to our loved ones, that stuff needs to be documented. It needs to be communicated well in advance. And I just feel so passionately about this. Come visit with us. I say to people, if you haven't had these conversations with your family, come talk to us and we can give you some tools to help you facilitate those conversations. It's wonderful how it brings families together.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.